Hey everybody, Nick here from another BookTube channel. Today, my March wrap-up and my April TBR. March was kind of a difficult month, I felt, for my reading. I think I moved at a lot slower clip for a lot of reasons. I kind of started the month with a work trip that put me a little bit behind the eight ball, and I also had an early book that was really long that took me a while to get into, and I'll go into which book that is in a moment. And then I ended the month with another trip, a vacation, where I didn't get a ton of reading done, but just enough. So without further ado, let's get into it. So my pace started off really strong in March, actually, because this first book I read in a single sitting, and that was Pen Pal by Dathan Auerbach. I put up a full review of this on the channel. This was a horror book that kind of started as a creepypasta, from what I understand, and it was just a really strong and very impressive book. I was very hesitant to read it because I thought that it wouldn't be, the quality of some of the horror books that I'm used to. I had a little bit of a bias against, online creepypasta writing, but it was really great. Very impressed with Dathan Auerbach's ability to kind of capture the honesty and the honest reactions of a child and how they would react to a scary situation. So that was really impressive. Check out my review for more information. The second book that I read in March was the one that really stopped me for a long time, and that was Dead House Gates by Steven Erikson, the second book of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. It really took me a while to get into this one. I did eventually find a groove, and I did end up enjoying it. I plan to continue the Malazan series, so if you followed this channel because of my original Gardens of the Moon review, stick around. I will be going to Memories of Ice. I don't know when. It's not going to be next month. We'll see, possibly May. But as far as Dead House Gates goes, I put up a full review for my complete thoughts, but I did like it. It was a bit of a struggle. I didn't quite like it as much as Gardens of the Moon. And I have a feeling it's one of those books where when you reread the series, you appreciate it a lot more. But I'm still a far off way from rereading. I've got to get through it the first time. So that's just, that was my initial reaction to it. Next up in March was Perfume, The Story of a Murderer by Patrick Suskind. This is more of a classic. It's a bit outside of my my niche of fantasy, horror, sci-fi. It's kind of closer to horror, but as I mentioned in my review on the channel, that if you're used to reading pure horror fiction, a book like Perfume isn't really going to shock you or take you by surprise. I read it at the recommendation of a friend. I'm glad I read it. I think it was good. It's just not what I was looking for in a book. I was hoping for a bit more murder, honestly. For The Story of a Murderer, I didn't think there was enough murder. I don't know what that says about me, but here we are. After Perfume, I read a non-fiction book, which I don't usually do, called A Man Without a Country by Kurt Vonnegut. This is a collection of essays. It's actually the last book that Vonnegut published before he passed away in 2007. And it's really funny. It's able to be read literally in a couple hours. I sat down on the couch to read it thinking, okay, this would be like a book for the weekend, and 2 hours later I was done. It's mostly just Vonnegut ranting about how much he hates George W. Bush, and also how he hates America's reliance on fossil fuels. So if that's something that you sound like you're interested in, check it out. Highly recommend it. Vonnegut's great. Next up was Dawn Shard by Brandon Sanderson. There should be a review up on the channel by now, by the time you see this. This is the last prose Cosmere book that I had to read to be fully caught up. So this is it. I am now caught up on Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere works as far as his prose goes. I keep mentioning prose there. That's because later in this video, when I get to my TBR, we'll talk about another Cosmere book that people often overlook and forget about. But Dawn Shard was really great. I think this is a really good addition to the Stormlight archive. If you're just reading the main novels, I highly recommend branching out and including the novellas as well. And wrapping up March, I'm actually not done with it as of this recording, but I will be by the time the month is over, and that's Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. Last year, Swan Song by McCammon ended up being my favorite book that I read that year. I was absolutely blown away by it. I loved it, and I immediately sought out what was going to be the next McCammon book I should go after. I saw a lot of hype about Boy's Life, and so I was waiting for the opportunity to read it, and I finally got it because I took a trip at the end of the month to visit a friend in Alabama. Boy's Life is set in Alabama, so I brought it and I read it on the plane. I read it while I was down there. I read it on the whole trip, and it is so far. Like I said, I'm only about halfway done with it right now. It's really good. I'm getting really strong Ray Bradbury vibes, who is my favorite author. So I'm really hoping that it's able to stick with that kind of tone and that quality all the way through to the end. I will be posting a full review of that at some point. So just hoping that that's going to be good, but that's going to be the last book that I read in March. Okay, quickly going over the graphic novels and comics that I read in March. I actually read a lot of single issues of comic books. I went to a show and I got a bunch of comics off of eBay at the beginning of the month, so I had a huge stack to read. I'm not going to go through each of those. So my graphic novel output was a little bit lower this month. I did mention on my last wrap-up video I wanted to read The Goon Volume 3. By the time March ends, I will be finished with it. I have a little bit left. And it's just as good as the first two Goon omnibuses. Omnibuy. Whatever. Eric Powell is just such a mastermind, an absolute genius of storytelling. And there's two more omnibuses after this one. And as soon as I'm done with this one, I'm going to pick up number 4. It's such a fantastic series. If you've never read a comic book in your life, pick up The Goon. It's so much fun. It's so easy to get into. It's so easy to read. Really, you won't regret it. Another comic I read this month was The Life and Death of Fritz the Cat by Robert Crumb. I posted a video about this on the channel as well, and about the difficulty of enjoying somebody like Robert Crumb in the 21st century. He's a pretty controversial artist, but I think that he's a genius. Legitimately, he's one of the best cartoonists to ever live. And if you can find this book, I highly recommend checking it out. Be prepared to see some things that will make you uncomfortable, but I think that there is value and merit here, and you can watch my video on it for more information. And finally, something completely different. The last graphic novel I read was Puppy Night, Den of Deception by Michael Sweater and Josue Cruz. This is a kid's comic. I bought this for my nephew for his birthday, and I read it before I wanted to give it to him just to make sure that it was actually good. I picked this up off of the small press shelf at my local comic shop, JHU Comic Books. Because the artwork on the inside is absolutely fantastic. I'll try to take some pictures and put them in here, but the art really just captured me immediately. And I thought, even if my nephew doesn't like this book, I kind of want it. It looks so much fun, and it was a really fun story. So if you've got some younger readers who like comics, highly recommend Puppy Night, Den of Deception for them. Alright, moving into my TBR for April. I'm going to be aiming for 6 books to read in that month. The first one is going to be Secret Project number 2 by Brandon Sanderson. I don't actually know what the title is. I haven't looked up anything about it. It'll be a complete surprise to me when I get the email and I download my ebook copy. I am not going to wait for the physical copy to get to me because there has been so much going on with the Team Dragonsteel fulfillment that I don't know when to expect this second book. I was very fortunate that my copy of Tress got to me really quickly. There are people still awaiting theirs, and it's been 3 months since they were supposed to. So I'll be reading the ebook, and I'll be reviewing that on the channel. Hopefully I enjoy it as much as Tress, but that's going to be a hard act to follow because I thought that book was fantastic, and I absolutely loved it. So we'll see how that goes. After that, in no particular order, some books that I want to read. The first is Ghost Eaters by Clay McLeod Chapman. I don't know anything about it in terms of plot. I've never read anything else by the author, but I do see this author pop up on my Instagram feed once in a while, and I've seen some good reviews of it on just other people that I follow, so I figured I'd give it a shot. I got it on my Kindle, so I'll check that out this month. Also in the horror vein, there's Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. This is the sequel to My Heart is a Chainsaw. I didn't really like My Heart is a Chainsaw all that much. It had some really good stuff in it, but as a complete story, I think it fell short. I'm hoping that this book takes what worked from Chainsaw and just delivers a more focused and cohesive experience. Another book that I want to read in April is Abaddon's Gate, the third book in the Expanse series. I am absolutely loving this series. The second book, Caliban's War, was phenomenal. I mean, it really blew me away. These books have been so much fun to read. They're so easy to read, despite like being so thick and imposing. They just go down so smooth. It's such a fun sci-fi series, so really looking forward to continuing that one. After that, I've actually got a nonfiction book planned, which I don't usually read a lot of nonfiction. So between Kurt Vonnegut in March and this book, I'm already, I think, doubling my nonfiction output from last year. And that's Devil's Advocate's Possession by Allison Taylor. The Devil's Advocates series, the book series, is basically their essays from scholars about classic horror movies. So in this case, the movie is Possession from 1981, which is a wild movie. If you've never seen it, I believe it should still be on Shudder right now. Get yourself, if you don't have Shudder, do a free month trial just to watch this movie. It's super interesting. The lead performance by Isabel Adjani is one of the most fearless performances I've ever seen in a movie, period. I think it's fantastic. And it's a movie that is perfect for academic criticism and dissection. So I'm really looking forward to whatever Allison Taylor has to teach me about this movie. And at some point during the month, probably in between longer books that I need a little bit of a break from, I will read Full Moon by Jim Butcher, the second Dresden Files book. The first book, I didn't love it, but it was a good, quick read. I anticipate the same from this. Hopefully I enjoy it a bit more than Stormfront. As far as graphic novels go, I mentioned before when I was talking about Dawn Shard that I am caught up now on prose Cosmere books. That's because there is a Cosmere comic, and that is White Sand. There are 3 volumes of White Sand that I've got from the library. This is by Brandon Sanderson, with scripting by Rick Hoskin and art by Julius Gomez. And this would finally officially be the last Cosmere work that I have to read to be completely caught up. So I'm looking forward to it. I don't hear a lot of people talk about White Sand much at all. I don't know if it's because it's not very good, or if it's because it's a comic and people just ignore comics, or they tend to disregard them. So I'm very curious to see if it's any good and if it's worth suggesting for other Cosmere completionists. That's it. That brings me to the end. That is a lot of books that we've gone over. Let me know if you have read any of them and your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for spending some time with me today, but now it's time to get back to reading.